Welcome everyone to Lessons Learned. My name is Vincent Vezza. I am an author. I'm the founder of Hidden Treasure Novels. I'm the regional representative for the Metro North chapter of the North Carolina Writers Network. I am so honored today to have with us fellow writer, fellow author, Alberto Perez, a former representative for the same chapter of the North Carolina Writers Network, a frequent contributor to Hidden Treasure Novels. And Alberto is going to share some lessons today with you that he's learned in his writing career. Alberto has 3 books under his belt right now, and I'd like to turn the stage over to you, Alberto, so you can talk a little bit about yourself and about what you've accomplished so far before you share some of the lessons with our audience. Yours.
Thank you, Vincent, for the intro. I appreciate it. A little about me. About 10 years ago, I was inspired to write on the second coming of Jesus Christ, and let the information stew for 10 years, literally. And one day I just sat down and decided it was the right thing to do, the right time, and I started putting the story together from a different perspective. Initially, I started off writing it in narrative form, and through the progression of my writing, I decided that maybe dialogue-based writing would be the way to actually tell the story and have people connect to the message better. So, and that's where I currently am. I have 3 books that have been published, and I'm working on the 4th, and expect to maybe have 6 books at the end so that the story is complete.
Wonderful. Well, Alberto, I appreciate that. I know today you're going to be sharing with us 3 lessons that you've learned, and the first lesson is kind of open-ended, I guess. Our character key is helpful. So tell us about that. What lesson did you learn when you were developing your character keys, and how were they helpful to you?
Okay, so lesson 1, character keys helpful. And let's just make sure that we know from the very beginning what, the definition, what's a character key. In short, if you're writing a series of books, like specifically like I am, and you have a lot of active characters, it's very difficult for the reader to follow along who all these people are. Because of that, I've placed character keys at the end of the book so that people, when they forget who someone is, or may forget who someone is, or need a little bit more information or a reminder, they can go back there and reference it. Personally, if you're writing a book, and just one book, not a series, you're not doing world development or universe creation, you probably don't need it. And at some of the point in time in the future, I'll probably talk more about a character profile. And a character key is an abbreviated version of a character profile, which could be 3 to 5 pages and talks about the whole history of the character. If you're doing dialogue writing, which is what I'm doing, you need the history of the person that you're placing in these different scenarios, so that you know how they're going to react. You know how they're going to react in different situations based on what other people are saying. And if you don't have that, it's your writing could turn out to be one-dimensional. So a character key is developed, like I said, to generate complexity, deep knowledge, and identification to specific characters so people can relate to them. And as you start to expand on your writing and your characters, you can put in what's called in the screenwriting lingo, lanterns, or Easter eggs or clues as to why the character is behaving in the way that they are, because you already know who their parents were, who their brothers and sisters were, whether they were orphans. And so people based on their history are going to react a certain way. you list in there, and I actually have an example that I wrote down just to read it so that it makes it a little bit easier for the viewer to follow along. Let's see here. All right, so here's just a quick example of what a character key would be. This is a character, obviously a fictitious character. So his name is Carlos Santos Adobo. He's 22 years old. He's a police sergeant. He's young, obviously. He's kind-hearted, morally true, guided by a sense of a divine justice inspired. He follows the letter of the law. However, he can be influenced by his best friend, who he considers to be his big brother. He's uncompromising, serious, often a bit too rigid. And because of that, he doesn't have many friends because he expects that whoever he calls a friend will follow his same moral code. And because of that, he personally alienates a lot of people. So, so when you're writing a character key, there's certain things you need to keep in mind, and it's specifically attributes that you don't want to generate conflict or discredit yourself as you move on through your story and create loopholes. And 1 minute he's a charismatic guy, the next 50 pages he's shy, and the next 50 pages he's outgoing, and the next 50 pages he's a recluse. So you got to keep the story going according to the character's initial identification, and that the character key helps you do that.
Alberto, I appreciate that. Your second lesson basically talks about reality, and you said how real is too real, and I wonder if you could share a little bit more about what you mean by that statement.
Okay, so how real is too real? And I have a couple of examples, and these are lessons learned by me. So as I was writing my second book, I had different scenarios in it. And in one particular, and obviously I gave the book out to beta readers when I first started writing, to have people give me input on specifically what they thought about the book. And I had a beta reader come back. It was a section in the book. I think I spent 3.5 pages talking about how to build a teepee. And the person came back to me, the beta reader came back to me and said, look, was it your intent to have, like, generate a how-to on how to build a teepee in the book? And I thought about it. I was like, no, not really. It says, well, that's what you have. I can literally tear out those 3.5 pages, and I can hand them to anybody and say, go build me a teepee, and they can go out to the woods and without tools and build a teepee. I said, but if that's not what your intent was, then maybe you should scale that back because it's just too much information. And that's part of what, how real is too real. So I took those 3.5 pages and condensed them down to a 1/2 page, because at the end, I didn't want the reader to sit there and have a tutorial or a how-to manual on how to build a teepee. That wasn't it literally took away from the story. And in another scenario that I wrote, my characters were in a bad situation and they were being arrested and being tortured. And I had another beta reader come to me and say, look, I appreciate the reality of what you're sharing, but I pick up a book for entertainment. I'm not picking up a book to find out how depressed I can get or, how grossed out I can get. And the worst part about your scenario and what you wrote in this particular section was, and the people were abused and getting tortured, is that in the back of my mind, I was thinking, you know what? That probably actually happens, which made it even worse. The beta reader told me. I said, that might be too much reality. I said, so tailor it back and allow the reader to fill in specifically what they want. just broad stroke it and don't give them too much reality. And so that was another lesson that I learned, that, you know, sometimes, yeah, you want to be accurate, but you know what? You got to balance your desire to be accurate with, you know, how much is too much, you know, how real is too real. So I thought it was important, and I took the majority of that information that I had in the book out and left it up to the reader to actually read the section and fill in whatever gaps were missing based on their own experience or imagination versus just laying it out there.
Makes a lot of sense, Alberto. Well, that leads us kind of to the third lesson that you wanted to share with the audience, and that was developing your writing style. And I know you have a unique writing style, and I appreciate it because I am one of your beta readers. Share a little bit with us about how you develop that style and what you would recommend to our writers who are watching this Zoom meeting.
So, yeah, so on to lesson 3, developing your writing style. I think that's important. When I first started, I did, like I said initially, I started off doing narrative writing, like most authors do. Personally, in narrative writing, everybody does it. You know, you start off, you can talk in the first person where you say, I said this, or I said that, or I did this, or I did that. And you move on to the second person where you would say, you know, you did this or you did that, and then move on to the third person, he said, she said, and that's all acceptable because that's what's done. When I originally wrote my first book, 150 pages into it, I stopped, reread, because I wanted to make sure that the story was flowing the way I wanted it to flow. And after I read it, I thought to myself, somebody's going to pick up this book and say, who's this guy? And why should I even be reading it? And, you know, toss the book behind them. So I said, you know what? I need to make it a little bit more personal. I want the people to get attached to the characters so that the message comes across a little better. Because obviously the message I was trying to portray was something that I found dear to my heart. And, you know, you can't save anybody if they don't read your book. So, or at least try to. So I said, you know what, I will generate characters and make it dialogue based. And as the reader goes through it, they will have a better connection, and hopefully a better connection with the actual characters. And while they're reading it, it actually sounds like they're part of the story because everybody's talking. And obviously you have to give narrative. You have to explain the scenes and where people are and the events arriving to where these people are currently collected, and that's understandable, of course it is. But I thought that the interesting part would be the dialogue. And let me tell you, dialogue writing is tough. Okay, if you know anything about dialogue writing, you know, most of us, when we speak to whoever, doesn't matter, family members, friends, children, half the time we don't even speak in complete sentences. We're not grammatically correct, and we stutter a lot. And you have to balance when you're doing dialogue writing with all those imperfections so that it comes across natural, yet when we read a book, we expect it to be in a certain way. You know, it has to be structured, it has to be coherent, with a lot of dialogue that occurs is kind of not. People are off on tangents when they should be talking about a specific subject. And we put up with that because our senses, when we're in person, take over when somebody's rambling, as an example. But so dialogue writing is difficult to be able to capture all that. And I think my initial failures were that I was too grammatically correct. And so my dialogue writing turned out to be stiff. And as time went on, and I started reading it, I actually learned that, you know what? People are not always grammatically correct. They don't always speak in complete sentences. You know, they stutter. And so that was part of generating a more realistic environment with respect to the characters and the things that they were saying. And it brought it home, and people were able to connect with the story better and have a realization that they actually thought that a particular scene, they could actually see it based on what people were describing, which is, by the way, another thing that we can talk in the future about, because that's difficult to do also when you describe scenes based on dialogue and people actually see what it is that you're conveying through dialogue. It's a powerful way to move people. So
yeah, Alberto, I appreciate that. Well,
of it.
yeah, and I remember seeing the story just a week or so ago in the Independent Tribune, published here in the greater Charlotte area, where you expanded on the voices of your characters and how there were certain phrases that would identify them, so you wouldn't have to say he said, she said. The reader would know who was doing the talking. I thought that was such a great lesson learned that you shared with readers in the Independent Trib. Yeah, and I know that you also have written the story. It's going to be published in the September issue of Senior Savvy, the Trail of Tales story, where you expand again on the very difficult task of writing dialogue. You know, so we really, 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 really appreciate that. I won't go into different narrative style because, you know, I have a slightly different bend. But I'd like you, Alberto, to share a little bit about the 3 books that are out there and available today. They are available at HTN. They're available in Aristo Publishing. They're available in Amazon. But if you, quick summary, if you will.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So the first book on the second coming of Jesus Christ, it's his arrival on earth and what that portrays with respect to the rapture and to those specifically left behind. There's a little girl, she's 10 years old, her name is Mia. She has a 208 IQ, and Jesus specifically targets her and obviously the people around her. She's important, and he comes back specifically to target her and her mother and her mother's best friend. And as time goes on and they're being chased, because obviously for those that don't know anything about the second coming or the apocalypse, as you would think about, and you don't have to, but just the word apocalypse has a message and has a vision and has visuals. And if you think about 1 billion people being taken off the planet at once, and the majority of them being children, people are going to be freaked out. And so that's where the first one goes. The second one is the gathering, the second coming of the gathering. And this is where Jesus Christ pulls together some unlikely souls to be able to testify like he did when he first showed up. You know, he went around and took a hold of 12 people, most that didn't know each other, and brought them together so that they could testify to what they saw. So it just wasn't him running around saving people and generating miracles and curing the sick and feeding the hungry, so that he had other people that would testify as to what he saw or what they saw and what they saw him do, and they could go out and reach the masses. And so in the second book, that's the story of where Jesus Christ comes in and picks 12 unlikely people to be able to minister to those that are lost on the world, which, by the way, all the good has been sucked out of it. So it's not a place you'd ever want to be. And then the third book are the trials, specifically, you know, what those 12 people are now faced to endure, and what the general population is expected to endure with the kind of chaos that's available in the world. And everybody knows that even today there's strife, there's chaos, there's racism, there's exploitation. The poor are poorer and the rich get richer. And now you have a bunch of morally true individuals that currently reside on planet Earth. Imagine if they were all gone, what you would have. And so that kind of gives you a glimpse as to what would transpire. And then the next book that I have is The Apocalypse. And that one does something that's quite different that probably has never been done. And I am going to point out specifically who the horsemen are, how they generate, why they generate the chaos that they do, and what industries they come from, how they're identified, and the Antichrist and the devil's assumption and takeover of the world in human form. So that's going to be an interesting read, and you're going to probably read and actually acquire information that probably has never been talked about, and exactly as to how it could happen, because obviously I'm not going to say that this is what's going to happen. But if I had to guess on how it would happen, I would bet it would happen something like this.
Yeah, Alberto, I'm so looking forward to reading the next book. You know, you have captions on here that it's a combination of science fiction and Christian and fantasy, and I love all three of those genres. No one knows for sure, of course, what it's going to be like. No one knows except the Father, the time and the place. But you've done a really nice job of weaving a story that will keep people engaged and will get people to think about, the second coming.
And what side of the message?
Well, it's fun. I just so thankful that you were able to spend the time with us today. I'm going to invite readers to join you on your journey, and invite them to visit with us at hiddentreasurenovels.com, and to stay tuned for another episode of HTN Lessons Learned. We'll try to get something going, perhaps on a weekly basis, Alberto, if your time permits. I know it's hard and trying to schedule, especially with all of your writing, but
Right.
we'll try to get that done.
Well, I mean, we can definitely do something. I'm thinking probably every 2 weeks. We're probably more respectful of my schedule, but that's definitely something that we can discuss and solidify move forward. So,
well, thanks, Alberto. Again, thank you, everyone who took the time to be on this call. We look forward to seeing you again. Stay tuned for future chapters and for future lessons learned. Have a great day and have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you learned something.
Thank you.
All right, buddy.